Hello and welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Heart of the Cast. It's going to be a nice little generic topic this week. We don't have any special plans or guests here with Mr. Josh, as always.
Hello. Yeah, we are struggling right now because we are, as all of you, waiting for this Forbidden Limited List to drop. By the time this podcast comes out, you will probably already have it. Because this one is just we're basically bridging time until the ban list is released, and then we're gonna have a podcast next weekend, which for you guys is gonna be last weekend. I'm confusing myself right now, but yeah.
Yeah, so last weekend's podcast, by the time you're hearing this, will be the Banlist podcast because they physically cannot, unless they're lying, and surely Konami wouldn't lie. This is the final week of August. So unless it's like Saturday 31st, 23:59 when they drop the ban list, it should hopefully be like any day now. But yeah, we're going to keep it generic just as an open subject and something that's probably going to be quite controversial and people are going to have very passionate opinions about, and that's going to be Stun.
Stun! I'm an expert now at Stun.
Yes. As the face and poster of Runick, I think you're going to have a lot of opinions on this one. We've kind of already semi-done like the Floodgate podcast, but I think that this is a little bit of a different angle that's worth discussing, and I think there's some actually genuinely interesting questions to ask about Stun specifically as a deck rather than Floodgates.
I mean, we've talked about like Floodgates and traps in that one podcast, but you like the I feel like the difference is like you can play Floodgates in any deck, right? You don't have to be specifically playing a Stun deck to be playing like a Floodgate, right? Most people are doing it right now. Is like siding a couple Floodgates for going first, or even maining them in case you go first, right? Skill drain's very powerful at the moment, so.
Yeah, exactly. We'll get into specifics in just a moment. I suppose we could spend the first 5 or 10 minutes right now discussing the a little bit of a yap right now, just as off the back of the genericness that we're going for this week. Of course, I do want to mention Patreon. Thank you to everyone who's been subscribing. I think the overwhelming support that has come from Patreon, I mean, there's like a couple of you subscribing every single day, which is really nice. And I think for a singular dollar, it's very much appreciated because it's pretty inconsequential for most of you. And for us, it goes a long way to improving the quality of the podcast. And of course, the most important thing is the Discord access. So if you guys want to take part in the discourse and the discussion, directing us with the topics, the Patreon questions, then that's obviously much appreciated. So let's begin with a generic discussion here. There's no point really talking about the ban list per se, because that's going to have already been done by the time we have talked about this. So I suppose we could look at a little bit of, I think we could maybe look at Master Duel a little bit and see where we're at recently. This is now the second World Championship. Of course, we had the World Championship last week. Sorry, last week's podcast, or 2 weeks ago.
Well, the World Championship would be happening right now when this podcast is releasing, right?
Exactly.
So hopefully we're doing well right now.
Yeah, future Josh, I hope you're moving into Top Cut for day 2 soon. But yeah, I suppose like in the topic of Master Duel, you did kind of talk about this a little bit with your stream before we started, was the festival. Just, I suppose we could maybe mention a little bit about the festivals in general and the direction that Master Duel is going with those type of things. I don't really feel like the festivals have been very innovative, right? It seems like they took a formula from the very beginning of the game, and it's just like, okay, well, let's do wind water, and it's like, okay, well, what's next? Are we gonna get like fire water and then light dark? Like, and I guess I've expressed this many times, but I would like to see essentially a flip between the festivals and the duel trials. I think the duel trials should be festivals.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Is like I feel like everything that's been fun and innovative has been made into a tryout duel, I think is what it's called, right? And the events are always just like, okay, here's only a fraction of the card pool. Like, we're gonna forbid darks, or you can only have synchros in your extra deck. You can only have wind and water, but it's never really like fundamentally changing how you play the game, which is something that the tryout duels always do. Maybe that's their idea with it. Maybe that's what it's supposed to be like. But I don't know.
I will say that we had a DC Cup specifically about Xyz summoning. I felt that was a big wasted opportunity. Like, that's a lot of dedication for one summoning mechanic, especially when you.
I would have played a DC Cup if it was like for Edison format or something, or Goat format. That would have been fun to like have a ladder for that kind of format.
I would genuinely love to see where I would place in that. Like, I'm so
Yeah.
curious. I think it would be such a cool test of skill. Because old Yu-Gi-Oh, we're not trying to be old men and boomers here, but it's a very different game. Like,
Yeah.
it's really different, and to test your skills in that type of thing would be super cool.
Mhm.
Hopefully in the future, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. For me
Um,
personally, these events usually are just like I play them for the rewards. So
yeah.
I go into them. I find myself going into them most of the time with the mentality of, yeah, let's just get this over with, because the gem rewards are really nice, right? They are, I feel like, pretty generous with these events, because how much is it usually, like 3K or something for the gems, and then they add some more missions halfway through as well.
I don't know the exact numbers, but
Hmm.
I'm not sure if it's just made up, but I've heard that they've slightly decreased
Okay.
in the recent festivals. That might be wrong.
I don't know. Yeah.
But yeah, I think like generally for the most part, people are just doing them for the reward,
Yeah.
which admittedly is really cool because the loner decks are good. Like, in fact, the Ice
Hmm.
Barrier loner deck was and the Goatee one were probably like optimal. Like, if you wanted to actually play the event, like it was good to play the Goatee one. Like, it was you were pretty much playing a constructed deck,
Hmm.
which begs the question because you did mention you talked about it earlier before you started the stream where you said, oh, they realized that they're not going to make any money from N and R, which is why they don't do that again.
Yeah.
But I think like most people are just doing loner decks, right? So is it really a question of money? Maybe they just don't think NR is a good way to play the game or something.
I
Because
guess.
we've had it once
Yeah.
in 2 years, but we've had like 3 XE cups or something,
Yeah.
3 XE festivals.
I think it has to be like they have the data. I think it has to be a matter of some people do actually build decks for it, right? Not everyone wants to play the loner decks. So
Mm.
some people are actually spending like gems on it, or even just crafting points that they have that they then don't have for other stuff. Which is something that I don't know. I don't know how many people that are, but I guess because I don't think it couldn't be the reception of the NNR festival, because I feel like it was pretty well received. If they just listened to the feedback on like, did you like the festival or not, I'm sure they would have repeated it. But I think what they noticed was that no one spent money because NNR is like basically like worthless, right? You don't have to.
You could spam a lot of crafts and getting your glossy rares, you know, that could maybe be worth like a pack.
Yeah, but it's true what you say, that they have actually improved on events in some way, shape, or form. They haven't. I feel like they haven't gotten innovative with it, but they have changed the structure to the loner deck specifically, right? Because I remember in the beginning, loner
They
decks
were
usually
unplayable.
were basically unplayable,
Yeah.
and you also on top of it, you would only get half of the experience or whatever it's called, if you played a loner deck. So basically, it
Mm.
was harder than building your own deck, and it was also less rewarding.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think if they really want to capitalize on it, type one in the chat if you agree with me. I think we should have a royal only event. That will be
Oh yeah,
that'll be a
yeah,
good
yeah.
one. That'll it's tax season, quarters coming up, shareholders want to know. They should probably have a royal only event.
Hmm.
That'll be a good one. You know what's really funny? I think Task actually hosted a royal only event, right? Does anyone remember
I
this? I'm
don't
not making
remember
this up,
this.
right?
I don't remember this at all.
Correct me if I'm wrong, chat, but I believe Tasku did a royal only event. Yeah, he did. I think it was like Labyrinth or something that one.
Oh, I'm not
Um,
surprised by that.
yeah, like if it's funny because if there is like full royal decks out there, it probably is like Labyrinth that's been royal. Like it seems like a thematically really beloved deck to a lot of people.
Mm.
But you're never really. I feel like you're never gonna see someone be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna max out my like Snake Eye deck, right? Like Pac was really into Pearly, so he tried to get some Royal Pearlies. He tried to do some like Royal Sword Souls. Like
Hmm.
branded players are really passionate, so a lot of branded players like to bling out their branded decks.
Yeah.
Like I can understand there's a big community but behind these type of themes, but I think that's probably kind of just says a lot about Snake Eye, right? Like people just don't care.
I have 5 royal runics.
Did you like deliberately get them
Yeah.
or? Oh, okay, that's a lot of SR, dude. So statistically, it's 1% for a royal rare. I think I was like 230 crafts to get my royal Kit Coloss, which was
Dude, I
really
pulled
good.
that.
You what? You pulled
I
it?
pulled it. I tried to craft it during tier format. I never got it. And then I like a couple months ago I opened master packs and I pulled a royal Kikolos out of it.
Master packs.
Yep.
Okay, all right. Well, didn't even play it at Worlds.
Nope.
Unfortunate. And I suppose like the one final thing I suppose before we actually dump into the topic, I thought it would be interesting to bring this up again. Hearthstone lets you use your crafting points to make a gold or a diamond. I don't know if you can craft diamonds.
I
But
don't think
basically in
so.
Hearthstone,
Yeah.
yeah. So in Hearthstone, you have like the artwork is animated for their golds basically, and you can spend triple the amount to craft a gold card. So basically, you would be able to go 90 dust in Yu-Gi-Oh, and you would be able to craft a royal instead of the natural 30 that it costs. I'm really curious how many people would actually do it, because right now it's like that's just an unattainable goal for 90%, 99% of the population. Like no one is going to royal out their deck.
Mhm.
But if you could like deterministically like fully royal a deck, and the important thing is determinism, because you have the guarantee royal craft if you just spend 3 times the amount. Would people do that?
I can just say I would have done it probably for one or two of my favorite decks at some
Yeah.
point. I think most people would have done that for like their favorite deck. Probably.
3 times is very cheap. I suppose you could like play around with the numbers, like you can make it 4 times, 5 times. But I think like the most important thing is like if there is very specifically a deterministic way to obtain it, then I think people would actually do it. But
I guess the question at this point is, do they make more money from that, or do they make more money from the of course very few people that actually go for royal rares, right?
Yeah.
Like, because I don't know, some things that come to mind is like I know that Jesse I think spent like 2K to get royal snows. I don't even want to know how much Pack and Sam spent on that stream where they made royal maxis and ashes.
Like who knows what it's actually
Yeah.
like mathematically correct for them to do. Obviously they have the data, but it's like, would you rather have 100 people on the planet all whale thousands and thousands every couple of months to try get a new deck or royal, or would you rather have it accessible to like tens of thousands of people, but they're only maybe spending like $10 each to try get a couple of extra bundles or something?
I guess
So
it makes pulling a royal rare feel more special. The fact that
yeah.
you can't just craft that, I feel it does feel good to pull a royal, even if it's for like I pulled like 3 Raid Raptor royals like for 2 weeks ago or something. Like I'm never gonna play that deck because I hate birds, but I'm also not gonna dismantle it because it feels freaking like special, right?
I regret dismantling my Royal Emptiness. I pulled that near the beginning of the
You had
game, but
royal emptiness?
yeah, dude, it's so weird. I don't. It's funny. We're talking about stun today. My royal pulls have been Gozen, Kaiser,
Oh.
Emptiness,
Oh.
like and a bunch of other stun cards. It's really kind of weird.
It's the universe telling you something.
Yeah.
You know what my first royal is?
What was your first royal?
Farfa.
Actually,
Yeah.
that's insane. My first pull was Farfa, which is really insane.
That's
My first, like the
sus.
first holo was
Konami
a
employee.
Farfa. uh, and I'm gonna go craft a Runick Fountain just for you. Actually, no, I'm not. That's an ultra. Never mind.
Yeah, you're not doing that.
All right, let's talk about stun today.
Yes.
Stun deck. Stun is a component and a type of playstyle in Yu-Gi-Oh that is specifically designed to completely shut down your opponent. We're talking no alternative win condition. We're not talking about like, Snake Eye flipping a skill drain. We're not talking about Ritual Beast summoning a Protoss. We are talking summon Pachycephalos, stick a Moon Mirror Shield on that bad boy, set some cards and go.
Yeah. I
Funnily
think that,
enough,
No,
go on.
ahead.
I just want to mention that very recently, Master Duel Meta posted a stun guide, and it is like I think it's like maybe like 10,000 words or something. It is multiple pages on just stun variants, deck building for stun, counters to. It is a super in-depth thing. I actually read through some of it for content.
Oh, you're trying to you're trying to learn. You're taking notes.
So I think like the first important, well, I suppose if you have a point to make before we go into defining what stun is.
No, I was just gonna like add to it and be like, yeah, there's because I feel like it's only stun when it's your main goal to win in that way, right? And just like not letting your opponent play the game. It's different from just having a floodgate in one of your decks. Like,
so that's the most important thing to differentiate. How do we define stun, right? So I guess a question would be, do you think Ritual Beast is a stun deck? Is Branded in TCG a stun deck?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. And how do you arrive at that conclusion? It's based on win condition?
I mean, they still have a possible win condition of giving the opponent Gimmick Puppet Nightmare, or they still have the win condition of summoning Protoss and locking your opponent out of the game occasionally, but it's not the only way they can win, essentially, right? Like they have plays and play patterns that just is normal make a board or break a board or whatever. It's not like I either do this or I can't win the game.
But you could argue that like some decks currently are like that, right? Like if you don't,
what?
well, I personally think if you don't summon Protoss with Ritual Beast, like I don't see how you're beating Snake Eye.
But like that doesn't make the deck a stun deck. Only because its end board is normal end board is too weak to beat the meta decks doesn't mean like it's a stun deck in its core.
Okay. So what if I just play like a bunch of trap cards, but I'm not playing Floodgates? Like I'm just playing Crackdown, Solemns, and some
that's not stun.
Dogmatica cards. So, but why is that stun?
That's not stun.
You don't think that's a stun deck?
No, that's not stun.
That's paleo.
Yeah, that's paleo. See, no, that's control.
Okay.
I think there's a difference between control and stun. At least the way I personally see it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So yeah, I think like to go off of to bounce off of a definition, it's a deck in which the win condition is entirely designed to shut down your opponent from playing with Floodgates, and without that, you do not really have a win condition other than, I don't know, Phosphodina Beatdown, right? Is that how we're going to define it?
I mean, it's just like, it's not based on interaction. It's just based on stun cards, right? Like instead of interacting with the opponent to win the game, you just like don't let the opponent play. It's hard to put it into words. I have problems putting it into words. I feel like it's very intuitive. I feel like there's a very intuitive difference between like setting 5 in Paleo and summon or summoning Pachi and setting 5 behind that in a stun deck.
Here's a perfect example, I think, right? Is Kashtira a stun deck?
No.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't know. Rise Heart is that's a big boy. That's
I mean, like Kashtira was a deck that had access to a Floodgate, but I don't think it was a stun deck per se. It was just a really cringe mid-rangey combo deck, I think.
A cringy mid-range combo
That's the official term.
So says Kashtira has attack pressure. I mean, you could argue that stun has pressure if you have enough barrier statues
could win
on the
games
field.
without a Rise Heart.
Yeah, I suppose that's maybe the difference. I think it's like if your deck can't win without a Floodgate, it's not. It is a stun deck, right?
Yeah.
Like you can win with like Steeds and some hand traps. You can win with like
Kashtira is still a thing, right? People still played Kashtira. It was mostly before like Fiendsmith and Snake Eye were like at this power level, but like Kashtira was a playable, like more control-ish type of deck where you would just like summon Unicorn or Fenrir and have a couple of hand traps, and that was a thing, right? It wasn't the best deck in the format, but it was played.
What about full power Kashtira with Shangura and Diablosis?
Even that I feel like was more like I would have classified it as like a mid-range deck with a with the option to Floodgate the opponent.
My best Yu-Gi-Oh memory on stream, honestly, is watching
the
Urena
finals?
like like 7-zone lock someone turn 2. Like holy, what a cool deck.
It was not a cool deck. That's the thing, right? That's why you gotta differentiate. Is like, not everything that isn't a stun deck is also like cool, right? It doesn't get a pass for just not being a stun deck. Like it's cringe for other reasons, but I don't think it classifies as a stun deck.
I think it's so funny that within the space of 6 months, we got 2 of the most iconic screenshots in the history of Yu-Gi-Oh! The pack Hani tier mirror, and then like the Urena like 9-zone lock on turn 2 versus Couch. That was
it's Couch doing it versus I think John Wilkin.
Oh, is it? Okay. I mean, I'm pretty sure it happened like twice on that that event,
Yeah, it was
by the
game
way,
1 and
so-
game 3 of the finals. It was Dominic. Yeah.
Oh, it's the same match.
It's the same match, yeah.
Good lord. All right. Okay, so I think we've got some sort of a broad definition, which is essentially like I think stun is basically you cannot win without like a stun card.
Yeah.
And stopping your opponent from playing the game.
Yeah.
Even something like Flu Wander could, in theory, win without like
Yeah.
MPen, right? Like you can probably still get away with like Avion negate, tributing stuff with the continuous and things like that.
Yeah, a deck does not become a stun deck because it has a floodgate, even if it's like a searchable floodgate. That does not make it a stun deck as a whole, right? Because you can outgrind people with Flu. Like sometimes they would make the decision of like searching, I don't know, Ryza the Mega Monarch instead of Empen because it was better in that situation, and then they could win off of the back of that. It doesn't make the deck cool in my book, but it's not a stun deck.
Yeah, so you're off the hook, branded players. You're not actually playing a stun deck.
Nope.
Is Hero a stun deck? Hero specifically, just for Jackass, if he's listening, yes, that is a stun deck. All right, let's talk about conceptually. Is this good? Should this type of thing exist? We talked a little bit about floodgates in general.
Mm-hmm.
I would say floodgates are bad and the most egregious when they're played in good decks. That's when floodgates are terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
But floodgates in fucking Dyna control, like, I don't know, man. Maybe it's fine that exists.
I agree that floodgates are even more problematic when they are being played in decks that are already really, really good. Like nothing feels worse than like, I don't know, being able to stop your Snake Eye opponent from going +10 with their combo because you did draw like a hand trap or two, and then they just set a skill drain, which obviously you're not prepared for that. Like obviously when I'm playing against this massive combo deck, even when it's post side, I probably won't have the luxury to have outs in my deck even to begin with, because I need to focus so much of my deck space on like stopping you from comboing me into Oblivion. So like I'll never really have a out to the skill drain that you're flipping on me. So that's really problematic. I don't know if okay is the word I'd use for dedicated stun decks. Because I just conceptually don't love the idea of a deck that exists just to make your opponent miserable and not able to play the game, which I will say also applies to the other end of the spectrum, which is like the super heavy combo decks, where I think actually the people that hate combo and the people that hate stun decks, they're not too different from one another. It's just they both don't like the idea of not being able to play the game, right? Actually, I think there's a lot of people who just don't like either, but yeah.
Well, I mean, in terms of that spectrum, I mean, they're complete opposite, but look at Drytron and then look at Dyna Control. Like, functionally, they're the same deck, if you ask me, right?
It's just less steps, right? It's just less steps until your opponent just picks up their deck and says, yeah, I can't play.
Yeah, that's kind of it's like any situation where you put into like draw the out, it's always rough. But you know, if you had like a magic wand and you could just like delete some cards, like what do you think? Like, do you delete every floodgate, or is there like room for archetype specific? I wouldn't really call it an archetype because stun has never been an archetype. But is there room for like these type of decks to exist?
There is room for these types of decks to exist. I think one specific like development in how Yu-Gi-Oh is being played nowadays has led to the decks being as problematic as they are. I don't actually think the concept of them is that problematic, in the sense that it feels very easy to beat a deck if you're prepared for it. Like if I told you, hey, build a deck that beats Snake Eye every time, you couldn't do that, right? But if I told you build a deck that beats Dyna Stun every time, it's super easy to do that, right? It's such a like one-dimensional thing where if your opponent has spell and trap removal and monster removal, like your deck never works, right? So I think the problem is that specifically spell trap removal is just most of the time not good enough in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Because decks just rely too much on monster combos. And there also just there isn't much good spell trap removal, right? Like the best spell trap removal you have is Cosmic Cyclone, which is not as amazing of a card, right? Like in a world where most Yu-Gi-Oh cards that are being played these days actually create card advantage, playing a card that just is a 1-for-1 trade, especially when you're going second into most meta decks, like it just won't really do anything, right?
Yes, what you're saying is because of its vulnerability to just one lightning storm and boom, that's it. Strategy's gone unless you have a bribe or judgment, and that makes it
Kind
kind
of
of
like
okay.
the concept of the deck is okay. I think it's only problematic because of how Yu-Gi-Oh is being played, is what I was trying to say. Like, it's aged very poorly. Like, it's a concept that back in the day it's already existed, like meta beat decks. Like, those decks are playable decks in most old formats, right? There's like anti-meta decks in most like, let's say pre 2014 15-ish, right? There's always decks that you can play that rely on like Summon Thunder King set 4 or whatever, but it's just like because those formats were inherently slower and back row removal was usually a main deck staple even in most of these formats. It was just something that you would usually be able to handle, and it would never have like an obscene win rate.
Yeah, I mean, so like I guess like to really put a definite, or not a definition, but like an answer, yes or no, like
Mm-hmm.
should that it exist? Like, is that fine? Like, yes, they're vulnerable, but like if you could ban all of these cards and ban every statue, would you want to do that?
I personally would. I don't know if it would be better for the community as a whole, because I feel like there is people that like to rely on it in some formats. You know, like sometimes, because I can understand that sentiment of like, hey, this really isn't my format. I still want to go to tournaments. I still want to meet my friends. I still want to be able to participate and not get slaughtered because I don't have a combo deck that can keep up with Snake Eye, or I don't want to play Snake Eye myself. So I get the sentiment of just like, you know, screw it. I'm gonna bring like Runick Stun to this tournament or whatever. But
Oh, whoa.
what?
Okay, I mean, that's a
Runick
different
Stun, not
topic we'll
White
get
Force
into.
Runick. They're different.
We'll get onto that topic. No, that's it's at the same time though. I don't know if it's weird because um the idea of like, okay, well, at that point you're not invested anyway because you're just there to hang out and see your friends and just whatever, right? So it's
Yep.
like, do those type of people even care if those cards get banned?
It's a fair point, because at this point, like, if you're going into a tournament with that attitude, do you even like, should you be able to compete, right? Should you be able to beat someone who's invested like hours and hours to preparing and like brings like a combo deck, and you just like flip skill drain on him, and you're just like, well, you know, I'm actually just here to meet my friends, but you can't play anyways. I guess I win. You know, like it's a fair point. It's hard to justify, I feel like. But
Because that's the thing with
yeah.
these type of like really sacky kind of dumb win conditions that don't really have much in terms of their skill expression. Something that very iconically stands out to me was Prague 2016, the YCS, and everyone was like, you know, trying to like theory out like the best Necros text. Like, is it Exiled Force? Is it Bullblader? You know, people were doing weird stuff like I think like Lavavel Chain, stack Necro Valley, or Commandant to like draw it and then Necro Valley your opponent's stuff. Just all these like crazy different techs and combos that people were trying to do. And then there was like this one guy, Brad's friend, who just brought Monarch FTK.
Yep.
So they're sitting in the hotel, and then they go to the lobby, and then like all weekend up to the event, they're just practicing, they're just play testing, they're just doing all these like hours and hours of theory and investment. And he's just sitting there on his like phone, or playing on like some maybe it was like a Nintendo Switch,
Like
and then
Subway
just
Surfers while they're practicing
yeah,
like Necros lines and stuff. Yeah.
and then shows up and then just plays Monarch FTK and tops. So these types of win conditions can reward that type of like behavior.
Yeah, but maybe that's part of the game, right? Maybe that's part of what makes Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! Is that not everyone needs to play the game in the same way, or even has to put in the same amount of like investment. I don't know.
Yeah. Monarch FTK and Necros didn't coexist. I guess it was like Paleo format or something.
Necros
or
is
Zoo or
2015, and then 2016 Prague was Pendulum. I'm pretty sure that had I think that had the Monarch FTK at the same time.
Yeah, something like that. It's very loosely a Monarch deck.
Yeah,
it's like
it doesn't matter what the tier 1 deck of the format is. The point still stands. Like, you know,
They for a second. Sorry to interrupt, but I need like 2 minutes. I've like spilled coffee.
Nice. All right. Okay, now what, chat? Now what? Bro spilled coffee.
You know, you're supposed to keep the cast going. Just saying.
Bro, what am I supposed to cast? What kind of coffee did you spill?
What kind? I don't know. Just coffee and a little bit of Earl Grey. All right, that's good enough for now.
I thought you were gonna cut it out anyways. That's why I just okay.
All right. I got stunned. Haha, get it? All right.
No, I don't get it.
Here's an interesting question. Would you rather have continuous floodgates or lingering floodgates exist?
If you like gave me the opportunity to remove one for good, I would actually maybe,
because if you get rid of continuous floodgates, you basically just delete stun, right? Because if stun drops a D barrier on you, then okay, cool. Well, they're not going to kill you next turn.
Yeah.
So then you just have the rest of the game to play.
That's what I thought as well, but then I feel like because of what we said earlier on how like floodgates are so much more problematic when they're being played in meta decks, that is so much easier to do with lingering floodgates. Because like the only reason, for example, why Snake Eye can't play Skill Drain is because it has this absurd like synergy where it can just send it for cost. That's the thing that just shouldn't be a thing. But normally, let's say I hand trap my opponent and they set a Skill Drain, they also won't be able to play next turn. So cards like Skill Drain and so on and so forth, they are a little bit worse in meta decks usually, right? So if we go by the argument of like it's worse when they happen in meta decks, then you should get rid of lingering floodgates. Because it's like so much more common when like you see like D barrier or something. Like for example, like Sword Soul or these types of decks, they could have never really played Skill Drain, right? Like, what's your board? Chi flip Skill Drain? Like, cool. You know, I win in 4 turns or something. If you set monster, please don't set monsters, because then... So, yeah, I think for the overall health of the game, I would rather get rid of, like, lingering floodgates.
Yeah. And I suppose it's a kind of an innocuous way to describe it, because it's not like one or the other. Like, I think theoretically, you could, like, obviously just deal with both of the problems. And I don't think anyone really believes that lingering floodgates are okay, which is weird because like continuous floodgates in a lot of cases sometimes are more egregious. But I think like one turn like auto wins potentially, like Dweller, Dimensional Barrier, Shifter. Like most people generally see those cards as quite toxic and shouldn't exist. I think it's quite a minority opinion to think that they should exist. But when it comes to like actual floodgates, they are just as bad in meta decks, but when it comes to stun, it's like, okay, well, if we ban the continuous floodgates, stun dies, but it doesn't really fix the meta decks per se, right?
Yeah, I think you would be surprised, especially from the TCG perspective, how little that would matter. I think, like, because stun, like, yeah, we talk about stun every once in a while, and people probably top with stun at like every event this format, but like for the most part, at least when I'm looking at my tournament experiences, it's usually like 1 stun a tournament max, and then I'm getting like Skill Drain flipped on me way more than that in other decks, so I don't know if it's really like that big of a problem, right?
What's the closest thing we've had to like stun support? Morganite?
I think it's just the floodgates. I don't know. I think like all the floodgates were the best Morganite support. Actually, also I'll say it. One of the no, Runick is good. Runick is good stun support. That is true. Runick is not per se a stun deck. I will fight anyone for that. But Runick is good in stun, right? The Runick stun deck is a good version of stun.
See, I wonder, like, when they make things like, for example, Morganite, which is... How recent is Morganite? Is that, like,
I think
22
years? Or 23.
Like, I look at a card like Morganite, and it's a Cyberstorm Access, wow, last year. I look at a card like Morganite, and I really, like, sort of ruminate, is that a deliberate design choice to, like, support stun? Because I don't see what you're playing this in other than a stun deck.
Paleo!
Okay. I mean, fair. You got me there, I suppose. You'll send you. But this idea of like waiting a turn, you can't do that unless you're stopping your opponent for a turn. Like, and the only way to stop your opponent for a turn is to play like some very heavy, like, you know, blowouts for the turn, like lingering cards or specifically
It's I guess it's another matter
Floodgates.
of what is the problematic design. Is it the cards that facilitate the stun deck or help it do what it does, or is it the actual floodgates, right?
And I think that is a very good discussion to have now, specifically
Yeah.
when we talk about Runick. So we can
Yeah.
probably start bringing in that elephant in the room. Like, what
Yep.
is Runick the problem, or is it just all of the floodgates?
Do you need me to state my opinion, or do we just move on with
Well, I think the problem is very clearly like the floodgates for sure.
Thank you.
But the problem is like I'm trying to think of like an allegory for this. You know, imagine some dude like goes to rob a bank. Like clearly that dude shouldn't be robbing the bank. But if I don't know where I'm going with this.
And who is Hugin in that case, in that scenario?
Hugin's the bank robber in this example.
Oh, okay. Wait, Hugin is the bank robber?
Yeah.
And what's the floodgate? Like the gun in their hand?
Well, like the security system. I don't know where I was going with this. Let's just stop. This is getting too complicated.
Great allegory. Okay, now, okay, well, I mean, I guess that solves the question. We can move on to the next one then.
So, I mean, you have to understand like the arguments against that, though, right? Like, what? Like, Runick is so synergistic with Floodgates.
I understand, and I do understand the frustration with that, right? Like, I 100% would agree when someone says like Hugin should only be able to protect Runick cards, for example. Like that is something that I 100% agree with, right? Like I just want to protect my fountain with it. I don't care about protecting anything else. So it's in a way, it's annoying to me because I like Runick for other reasons, right? I just don't like it for that reason. I also would like Runick the same amount pretty much if it didn't banish off the top of your opponent's deck. Like for me, it doesn't even need to be like a deck out strat. Because that's the other point of synergy. Like Runick Stun doesn't even have to look for a win condition, right? Like it's like Runick Stun just stuns the opponent, and how do you win? Well, you just deck out the opponent because you're always ahead on cards in deck because you're playing a Runick deck, right? So like I see where the frustration comes from, but I just still feel like I personally think the floodgates are the annoying part, but I definitely see like why the specific synergy is very frustrating. Because it's frustrating to me too, right? I, as someone who likes Runick combo decks, I suffer from this every time I play a Runick deck. Like the people that hate on it because it's also so synergistic with stun.
Yeah, it's very much a chicken before the egg type of question though,
Yeah.
because it's like it brings in these other kind of hypothetical examples, right? Like, you know, like that sort of Verte fusion Dragoon loop, right? Like, is the problem back when Dragoon was powerful? Like, was Dragoon the problem, or like was it actually Verte, or like is the fusion being a fusion from deck thing the problem, right? And it's trying to find like where the source of that issue is sometimes a little bit hard. I think it's more, what's the word? Easier to define outside of stun and this example with Runick, because I would be very hard pressed to find a logical argument for why someone would say Runick cards are the problem. But
they're
yeah,
not.
I mean, yeah, but the thing is, like, there is a couple of design implementations.
Yeah, I get it. No, I get what you mean. I get what you mean. Yeah. It's the same way for me. Whenever I say Runicks are not the problem, I do see the arguments of why people are frustrated with it. So it's like, yeah.
If it was specifically wasn't like the random banishes, I think that would like be maybe okay. And as you said, if Hugin like only protected Runick cards, that would make sense. But Hugin just becomes a little bit more useless. Well, not useless. But it loses a lot of its power. Nah, does it?
It doesn't lose much
of
of its power. It loses versatility, right? Because like in the decks that I've played Runicks in, Hugin is never really used to protect from like Duster or something like that, right? It can do that, and I'm sure it's come up for me, but like usually it's just being synchroed off anyways, right? Like or linked off or exceed summoned with or whatever. It's not the main purpose of it. It loses synergies with other decks more than with the ones that I've been playing, right?
Yeah. We can move on to like some other cards that also have this kind of synergy stun problem, which I think is very common among the pot cards.
Pots,
I
yeah,
think
okay.
that usually when you need to use resources in your extra deck, like most decks use their extra deck, right? Which is why they can't really. Not every deck can play Prosperity, or at least a lot of decks can't go 6 deep into Prosperity, especially into a second copy.
Yeah.
I think like the most egregious example is probably Extravagance.
Yep.
That is a card that essentially, like, unless your deck plays, an extra deck and it only really needs like 2 monsters. I think a big example of this was like Altergeist. Just needed to play like what 3 Hextia, 3 Link
Yeah.
Rebo, and you didn't really need anything else.
Yeah, or Spiral, which like if as long as you didn't banish all your double helix, it was like fine.
Yeah, these kind of cards have historically always been staples in stun decks, and I think a good question there is like, are those is Extravagance specifically a poorly designed card?
I don't think so. No, I think the biggest issue I have with Extravagance is I think something that you brought up at some point where like you don't want to be forced to play 3 copies of certain like expensive extra deck staples like Chaos Angel or something. Like it creates really frustrating dynamics like outside of the game. Like when you're building your deck, you're like that card is expensive. I'm happy I own 1 of it. Like I don't want to buy 2 more just to be able to play this one deck with Extravagance. So that's annoying. But gameplay wise, I find it really hard to argue for cards like Pot of Extravagance or Pot of Duality, out of all things, to be like on the Forbidden Limited list. Like specifically because they are so non-generic, they go into so few decks and they lock you out of some of the most powerful things in Yu-Gi-Oh, which is like the extra deck or special summoning in general. Is like, I don't think those cards are the issue. I think it's wild that Duality is at 1 in Master Duel. Like that card has no business being on the list, I think. Like Prosperity is fair enough because that was in almost any deck, but Duality is like, that card just doesn't, that card just shouldn't be there.
I think like Prosperity going for 6 is too powerful. But I think like, if it was like maybe 3, it'd be a little bit less egregious. The problem with Prosperity is like it's so good. Like there's almost no drawback to it.
Yeah.
Because of the concentrated decision making you're making. Like you are saying, okay, I know I'm not going to need this, and this because I'm going second, or it's this matchup and I don't need these cards.
Yeah.
There is some like good decision making. There's like there's a game that I very vividly remember. I like banished a copy of a card in Prosperity when I was playing Unchained, and like 3 turns down the line, I was like, I shouldn't have banished that. That was a mistake. And I think that's very good because it rewards the this type of decision making. But I find Extravagance specifically like bad for this because it's RNG, so you can just lose to like getting 3 like important cards hit off the top. I'm sure everyone who's played a lot of Extravagance has had bad beat stories about I banished 3 copies of my thing. But it's a lot. These pot cards do have too much synergy with stun, maybe.
I guess the same question goes for a card that I really liked back in the day before stun was really a relevant archetype, or it wasn't at the time, is like Card of Demise, right? Like Card of Demise, when it came out, I enjoyed it a lot because it facilitated like a play style that I really liked. But then like now it's just a stun card, right?
I mean, I don't know. I think you were the only. I'll be honest. I think you were the first person who played Demise in not a stun deck, because that was played. That was
actually,
played.
Yeah, there was maybe decks before that were stun decks. I don't know. That's the thing. Like I like Card of Demise.
I'm seeing a pattern here, by the way.
Yeah, I know. I'm aware.
Pot.
But I think it's wishful thinking. I think is the thing. I'm really good at that. Like I just wish Card of Demise was playable in decks like Paleo and not in stun decks. I just wish the game was like that, where people would actually play those decks if we gave them Card of Demise. But the truth of the matter is, if Card of Demise was at 3, people would mainly just put it into stun decks. So like maybe it's just a matter of the Yu-Gi-Oh community just doesn't deserve cool cards like that, because they will just put them into stun decks, and so yeah, it's annoying.
Yeah, and I think that goes without saying because they just have all of that synergy. And the last pot card I did want to bring up was Desires.
Yeah.
I'm feeling like Desires is becoming a card that is basically unplayable. I think so many decks just have way too much engine requirement now that What was the last like meta deck that played Desires? I can't
Sword
think of
Soul
anything.
sometimes. I think genuinely it's like Sword Soul, maybe Branded at some point played
That
it.
long ago?
2 years, yeah, probably.
Wow.
Oh yeah, I
So
played it in Melodious, but I don't know if that counts as a meta deck. That's more like tier 2, tier 3. Cash Tira sometimes played it. But I think you got a fair point where like especially this year's archetypes are like very bad in that like regard, where like every single combo lets you like tutor 15 different one-ofs out of your deck that you, if you banish that one of Oak or one of Temple or one of Original or one of Flamberge or one of Snake Eye Diabell Star or one of Lurie or one of
okay, we get it.
yeah. So yeah, we get it. Yeah, okay, I'll shut up.
So it's just like 18 examples in 10 seconds.
Bro, it was only one deck. I wasn't even done with that one deck.
I know that's why that's so funny.
Yeah,
That was
I was trying to
deck.
emphasize the point.
By the way, I think this is a really interesting point. I think like the more you notice like that Desires is less played, like sometimes like the more broken the decks are, because they just have so many cards that you need and have to tutor.
Yeah. And if you need a card to be able to be searched, it also means that you plan to access that card every game, right? So that tells a lot about your deck. Like it says a lot about your deck if you're like, oh, well, I need those 10 one-ofs in my deck because I'm probably going to need all of them turn 1. It's like, dude, what does your turn 1 look like? And then you look at the Snake Eye turn 1, you're like, oh, that's what it looks like. Well, damn, that's a lot of summons.
I don't actually think it's 1-card combos that are the issue, though. I think it's just it could be a 2-card combo, it could be a 3-card combo. If you're tutoring like 10 cards out of your deck immediately.
Yes, but it's like especially outrageous when 1 card does that, right? It's
of course, yeah.
Well, if I'm able to see like 10 cards out of my deck when I'm doing a 3-card combo, that's way more reasonable when I do it with 1.
All right, well, I don't actually have too many other topics to like bring up with regards to stun, because I mean, it feels like it's a bit of a small subject. I guess maybe like the benefits, or like the maybe not the benefits, but like why are people drawn to stun? Like there are, I think, seemingly a lot of players, I think, who've made a name for themselves who like exclusively only play stun. Like
I think at that point, I think that's funny though. I find it funny when just like someone's entire identity is just like, dude, I'm going there and I'm stunning the shit out of people.
Like, yeah. Do you think Asian Persuasion is just in it for the bit at this point?
I think so. I think they're committed. I think they're committed. I think they've thrown their Yu-Gi-Oh career away. It's done. It's over. It's this now.
They don't actually like enjoy the deck anymore. They're
oh, they enjoy it. I think. I think that's the thing. I don't think they've chosen this path like by chance. Like they just like it like that.
It's really strange because I feel like it's weird, isn't it? It's like the older generation of Yu-Gi-Oh players that seem to be the stun duelist, right? Like I don't think you're seeing any like.
We are the older generation of Yu-Gi-Oh players. What do you mean?
Yeah, I know. I'm self-reporting here because for me it's a content thing. I think stun is insane content. Like I'll occasionally just build like a stun deck for Master for sure. But like people who like actually just play stun regularly and like take it to events, like it's not like the 14-year-old Zoomers who need to like activate 17 card effects in their draw phase to like feel like they're having fun, right? Like these like Fortnite Yu-Gi-Oh duelists, they're all like, you know, the same sort of generation, I feel like, right? They're the kind of younger Gen Z, new gen after that, and
Dude, now that you said that, I can't help but think of like a Snake Eye Mirror as like one of those building battles in Fortnite.
Dude, that's what it feels like.
It's not a bad comparison, unironically. Like I actually I'm scared by how accurate that is.
Just think of a tier mirror. Like that's exactly how that played at full power.
Dude, it's so we're not in postmodern, we're in Fortnite Yu-Gi-Oh era. That's literally what it is. This is Fortnite Yu-Gi-Oh.
But like what's the draw? I don't get it personally. Because I've tried to play stun before, like seriously play stun for like an well, I'm not really having fun. Like I win a game and I'm like, okay, well, that was just kind of miserable. Like that wasn't like fun. I know it's such a subjective thing, but like, and then my opponent is also like clearly not having fun. And some people get like really, really frustrated, like on a social level. I think you'll probably
yeah. That's another thing I guess that we should probably call out is like, bro, don't hate the freaking player. If someone decides to play stun, Just let him play stun. If you lose to stun, just lose to stun. Just take the L and move on. You don't have to insult your opponent on like a personal level because they're playing a stun deck. I feel like that.
But I will sort of.
No, I get it. I get the
I'm not
frustration.
gonna say. Okay, you know what? I'm not gonna go with but. This is I'm not racist but type of situation. I'm not gonna go there. Okay, whatever. Don't insult anyone playing stun. Stun is a valid win condition. It's all good. Yeah.
You didn't sound like it's all good over there.
Okay, but like, really, why are you playing this deck? Like, any deck in the game, and it's like I'm going to go out of my way to sadistically make it so that no one enjoys Yu-Gi-Oh. You're not gonna play your game. I'm not gonna sit here and have fun because I'm not doing anything. I'm summoning a monster and setting a card. Like, I'm making like 3 actions per hour, right? Like, this is surely not fun for anyone involved. No party, like, watching it isn't. Okay, I mean, I don't know. Watching it's a little bit funny on stream.
Bro, I don't know. Like, I activating Mystic Mine and putting a beat cop counter onto it, and then looking my opponent in the eye and watching or like waiting for the realization that now they don't have an out to it anymore. It's kind of satisfying.
That event was so funny. I did that. For context, chat, I stole Josh's Sprite board breaker list for that YCS, and I played against a French duelist, and I did that exact combo with the beat cop on Mystic Mine, and then he kept like drawing and passing. So I was like, so do you want to scoop? Like, should we go to next game? And then he was, suddenly for EU duelists, you know what I'm talking about. Suddenly everyone forgets how to speak English, right? Like when time is approaching and stuff like that. Like EU duelists, suddenly there's like language barriers, translations that are required. And yeah, like I just remember it was very specific and vivid to me because he was like physically kind of upset.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not just the case of like, man, I lost. It's like I lost to this like Floodgate, and I could tell that he was like visibly upset about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think like on a social level, stun also like creates like real discord in communities, right?
Like it's not the kind of stuff you want to be playing if you're like if you don't like confrontation and stuff like that. But did it feel good after you won?
I mean, it's always good to beat a French player, I suppose.
Okay.
But that's not a stun reason. Like, that's like a, economic reason.
What?
Sorry, we're not trying to get political here. Anyway,
I feel like okay, yeah, I feel like we just did that. Okay.
I should probably highlight a very good duelist who, well, I say very good, like, I mean, like, as a person, maybe not like gameplay wise. But there was a dude who was at my locals, and maybe some of you guys can relate. There was like lots of different locals I think have like that player, like that guy who like always shows up every week and he's just playing like stun. And I'd like to shout out we call him Mirror Force John. Have I told you this story before?
I don't think so. I would have recognized or remembered the name Mirror Force John.
So Mirror Force John was a guy who used to come to locals. When I started playing, he was there. He'd been playing for years at that point, and all the way throughout Hat format, Necros format, 2016, for years and years, Mirror Force John would show up, and over the years, Stun would get like a bunch of support cards, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there was like Majesty's Fiend when that came out. I think what was that, 2014?
He only comes to the like sneak previews of the sets that have like an insane stun card in it, and I asks everybody like, dude, did you pull Majesty's Fiend?
Like he was like, and again, I don't know if it's like a stereotype, but he was like an older guy. He was like 40, 50 plus or something.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the generation, I guess, that really appreciate the stun strategy. So Mirror Force John used to, and you can probably tell by the name why we called him Mirror Force John. It's because his game plan, no matter what, was he would just play a stun monster, so Dyna, Majesty's Fiend, Vanity's Fiend, and of course, Mausoleum and Stormforth to get them out,
mm-hmm.
and they would be backed up with battle traps.
Mm-hmm.
Mirror Force, Storming Mirror Force, Blazing Mirror Force, OG Mirror Force John was playing every Mirror Force printed in his deck. And it was a great time at local. Well, not at the time. I think I look back at it very fondly in hindsight because it's some of the best times of Yu-Gi-Oh. He was such a nice guy, but he was just a stun Andy, and that's all he did. And you can just imagine this like older like Scottish gentleman when you declare an attack on his Gene Warp werewolf with a moon mirror shield, and then he looks at you and he declares damage step in like this thick Glasgow accent. It was always amazing.
I mean, but isn't that kind of like fun or cool that people like that can exist? I don't
Not
know.
at the time.
I mean, yeah,
Not
I
at
get
the
it,
time.
but like in the grand scheme of things, isn't it a good thing that people can play Yu-Gi-Oh in very different ways and stuff like that? I don't know. I know it's frustrating when you're playing against it in that moment.
Yeah, I suppose it is, isn't it?
But it's like, I don't know. It's like, because maybe if that wasn't a thing, we wouldn't have those players at all. And for some people are not going to be like good, but it's like I don't know. I don't know if it's a net, if it's a net positive if we lose all those people.
Yeah, I think there's like obviously Jeff Leonard was the most iconic stun player until Mystic Mind got banned, and then like weirdly somehow pivoted to playing FTKs. By the way, I guess he was just showing that, you know what, older dudes,
Bro,
they
it's the
can
same
play.
thing. They took Mystic Mind away from him, so like he went to the complete. I mean, he was on the dark side to begin with, so I don't know where he went, but he went somewhere.
Just a different type of dark side, I suppose. And the LATAM community, I think they have like a particularly famous stun player. I think in Brazil, like he's quite well known. He did like a deck profile semi recently. And it's just these older dudes who play stun. And yeah, I mean, I guess you're right. Like it's definitely not enjoyable to play and sit and duel, but it is very wholesome to see like different generations like coming down to play Yu-Gi-Oh and still having a good time.
Yeah, it's not all bad.
Yeah. But like, why can't they play something else?
No, I get it.
We'll still love you if you play another deck. Like, but why?
Yeah, but they will never win if they don't. Like, it's like it's, and that I don't mean that in a negative way. It's that because it's not only about like old people or whatever. It's mainly just the people that don't have the time to keep up with it. That I think is usually the issue. For the most part, it's like, well, I don't have the time, or I don't want to commit the time to stay up to date with Yu-Gi-Oh because it's a lot of work, and like, you know, so they will just be like, you know, I'll just not take it as seriously, but then I can't play a meta deck because if I don't take it seriously, I'll never top using Snake Eye or whatever, or I might not even want to afford Snake Eye if I only play once a month or something.
But don't you think if you've been playing for X amount of time and you aren't really in tune with the current format and metagame, like you would just play the deck that you were normally playing, right? Like, what's the difference between me literally playing? Yeah, but like, you know, look at Burning Abyss, for example, right? Like, I basically just play that, right? Because I don't really have anything else. I don't want to like spend the time, at least this format.
Yeah.
So it's like, why are these people not playing other decks? You know, you could be stop posting my locals record in chat. I didn't win a game last week. It was insane. Anyway.
Yeah, see, maybe that's the reason.
Yeah, if I played stun, I could have won a couple more.
Because only because you don't have time to keep up with the game does not mean you want to go to a tournament and like not even have a chance to do well, right?
Are you saying stun's better than BA?
Yes. Obviously.
Yeah, maybe that's what it is. Because like I guess like if you take a deck like stun, you can just beat the best deck in the room if you win the coin flip.
That is the appeal, I think. It gives you at least the chance of doing well without putting in too much effort. Which you can talk about whether that's conceptually a good idea and should be possible, which I argue stun decks should probably be a little bit weaker to the point where if you just like don't practice and don't bother about the game at all, you shouldn't be able to top like a YCS or whatever just because you decided to play stun. But like conceptually, having low, like, because the lowest barrier of entry to Yu-Gi-Oh is playing a stun deck. Period.
Barrier to entry, and I suppose, yeah, multiple ways. Complexity, budget as well is also very important.
So like we as a community, we already have the problem of like, oh, it's hard to get started with Yu-Gi-Oh. It's whatever. Like people are huge barrier of entries away from playing the game. Then it's like it's the deck with the lowest barrier of entry is stun, and I think that's why people play it.
Yeah. So it's a weird paradox almost that it's good that it exists, but it's also
And it's
somewhat
especially
frustrating.
paradox because I always tell people the opposite. I tell people if you want to learn how to play Yu-Gi-Oh, don't play stun because you won't get better, right? And that's I think that's also why there's so many people that are a stun player basically forever, is because like that's what they know and that's what takes the least amount of effort, and they also don't get much better while doing it, right? Like it's like, yes, if you play a combo deck or a mid-range deck when you start playing Yu-Gi-Oh, you'll probably make a lot of mistakes and lose a lot more than if you were playing stun, but you will also improve, and stun doesn't really do that for you, right?
Yeah, I think like you're gonna learn the game more even with something like Tenpai than if you were summoning a Phosphodina for sure.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah.
It's weird. I think like Stun is the deck that I don't want to play the game. I don't really want to engage in the modern game, but I will anyway because I'm here and my friends are here and stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas, Tenpai and Pearly and all of these entry level decks. I say entry level from the budget perspective.
Yeah.
I don't know what I would really refer to as a good entry level deck these days as.
Mhm.
But yeah, those are the decks for people who want to progress through the game. Whereas Stun, I think, very much is a very much relinquishing all type of engagement with Yu-Gi-Oh! Weirdly enough, but I don't know. It's weird because there is also stun competitive players, like really competitive stun players. Like,
I mean, from that perspective, I understand it though.
What, competitive stun?
Yeah, I've considered stun for tournaments in the past.
Yeah, well, the thing is, it's always like a meta call rather than I am a stun player type of thing.
No,
so
like
that's the difference, right?
Look, I hate stun. I don't enjoy playing stun. If I ever had like an important YCS and I thought like, oh, stun is an insane meta call right now, I would run it. It wouldn't appeal to me because I like decks with more skill expression and such like that. But if I feel like it gives me the best odds, hands down, to just win this tournament, I would do it.
Yeah, that's definitely true for like all competitive players. But I'm speaking specifically on the case of like competitive stun players who aren't one-off picking stun as a meta call. They are like these are like active stun players, like Asian Persuasion.
So they want to play competitively, but they only want to play stun.
Yeah,
yeah.
Like,
I don't understand
I think
that.
there is. I think there is a pocket of players like that.
Yeah,
right?
I don't know. Like, yeah.
I think shoutouts to Leon or something from the Disciples, right? Didn't he get like 2 or 3 YCS tops in a row just playing Horus stun? Like maybe he's not a stun player. Maybe he just thought they were just straight up like good meta calls for multiple YCSs and events. And
I guess we don't have anyone who does that on the podcast. Cause I'd be interested in to hear like why.
Yeah. Well, regionals as well. I think there was like one like YCS and go on.
No, why are you like this? Is what I would like.
Why
to ask
are you like this? He beat me in the last round on YCS Rio Bubble. Yeah, it was definitely like Brazil, I think, that he topped, and then like multiple regionals. Because it's like at that point you are traveling across the world.
Yeah, that's crazy.
You're getting on a plane from the United Kingdom to go to Brazil, which already is come to Brazil. And you're playing stun. Like that's dedication, right? I feel like we should have got Leon or Asian Persuasion on for this one. Actually, that would have been that would have been a good shout. You know what's funny about Asian Persuasion? I'll call him Johnny because that's his name. I think the last deck I remember him playing was Cosmo. So
see, I remember him for Lightsworn. That's how old I am.
Like Lightsworn, like
Lightsworn.
Oh damn! Like we're talking Celestia tribute summon Lightsworn. That's crazy. Okay. Fair enough, I suppose. Yeah, that's maybe when you've just been in the game for so long, you either keep up and you just deal with it, you quit, or you
play stun.
play stun. Or you make content about it and stream on Twitch. I don't know.
Yep.
All right, let's maybe take a look at some Patreon questions. I don't think this is a super long
It's very hard
podcast
to reach a consensus on stun because it's just like, some people like it, most people hate it. Is there a justification for it? I don't really know. It's hard to make one, but we tried at least to look at it from some different perspectives. But I think that's always the moral of the story when you're talking about a hobby with such a big community, is that you just like, you can't see stuff out of your own perspective like exclusively. There's always other people that enjoy the game in other ways, and I think like it could just be valid for it to exist for them in that way. And at the end of the day, most of the time when you're preparing for a tournament, like in most formats, you have ways to prepare for it. And if you like decide to prepare for it, it's usually easy to beat stun if you have outs to it in your deck. But obviously, it's sometimes weird to make concessions in your deck to beat those kind of decks. But yeah.
From what I understand of my interpretation and theory of how I've just seen Konami like grow and design cards over the years is I think that as long as something isn't consistent and relevant enough, it's okay to exist because they create like unique moments where, as awful as you might think stun is, there is a big sort of like, you know, hype almost in the community whenever some iconic thing happens on stream, like some wild rip of card demise off the top of the deck from a stun player, or there's, you know, like all of the limitations on the cards, for example. Like you asked, like, why is Foolish Burial, Rota, Soul Charge limited back in the day, for example, right? It's like because having those at one, they create moments of hype and excitement and luck that is cool from a spectator perspective. And I guess stun sort of facilitates that niche in some type of way as well.
The satisfaction that people feel when like the top tier hated meta Snake Eye deck just gets a freaking skill drain flipped on it by a Runick deck, and then just sits there and normally does like 20 special summons a turn, but now it's just like, dude, stare, can't do anything. And just slowly loses to it. Like I think there's a huge part in the viewer, in the audience, that like just finds that hilarious.
See, someone sarcastically saying just now, bro, it's so hype they flip scale drain, holy PogChamp. But like,
have people do that?
If you've ever been to a YCS and it's like people are sitting down in the crowd and they're watching like top 8, top 4, and there's like a stun like duelist there. If you guys remember the Duster moment that Jess used against like Juho as an example, like these like Saki one-offs that most people think are probably quite problematic, they create these insane hype moments that is crazy to watch for everyone except unless you're very specifically Juho, right? like that's what these type of, you know, one-offs and one-off exceptions to the rules that like stun creates. It makes these type of moments. No, they don't. Okay, cool. Sure. Your name is Fighting Games Are Dead. You hate everything. Don't comment. Sorry. I got one guide.
One guy.
Yeah, so I think that's like my my interpretation and theory for why these things like continue to exist. I think if stun was a much bigger problem where we're seeing like consistently like 4 or 5 plus YCS tops from stun variants per event, I think we'd be seeing some very serious hits on them, but it's very much an anti-meta call that's going to pretty much never be relevant unless
like it's a matter of I think they're willing to hit floodgates, but they usually have, at least the pattern in recent years I feel like has been, we'll hit the floodgates once they reach the meta decks, right? Like once the Snake Eye decks start flipping anti-spell, that's when we start hitting anti-spell. And now that the Snake Eye decks have started hitting skill drain, my prediction is now is when they start hitting skill drain, right? I feel like they've always been okay with, you know, this like off the wall stun deck being at least somewhat a thing. I don't know. I could see Runick stun unfortunately getting a hit on the Runick cards side of things because it's just easier for them to do that. But I mean, I hope not, but I could see that happening.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Mystic Mine is such a good example, right? Because it was pretty much a universally hated card, but whenever that thing was on stream or on feature, like people went ballistic. For better or for worse, like people were popping off when Mine was ever activated.
I think part of it was the people were like sarcastic about it though. Like they wouldn't mean it. They would just be like, "Hey, look at this cool card that just got activated. I guess I'll cheer for it."
I don't actually. Yeah, and then all the closeted like Mystic Mine players who actually love the card are just like, yeah, no, I'm being ironic, guys. I promise.
No, I don't mean it. I'm just clapping so they get the message.
All right. Let's I suppose take a couple of patron questions here. We'll fire through them quickly, and then we'll wrap up before the ban list drops in T-minus 1 hour 35 minutes copium. All right, let's see. Why is Josh not playing the card his team is named after?
What, Snipe Hunter?
Yeah.
Because it's a
Do you like that card? Like, what? Why did you name your whole ass team after it?
Dude, okay, we named our team Snipe Hunters because it was my 5th time, and Snipe Hunter hits on 5. So it works. It worked. You can't say it didn't work.
I mean, not wrong, I guess.
The only problem is that this time is number 6. So we don't talk about what Snipe Hunter does when you roll 6. So yeah.
How would you guys fix trap cards? Every good trap card doesn't play like one. Maybe change the rules. Player can go second, set turn 0, and activate it this turn. We did talk a lot about this on. I think we had a trap card
we
podcast.
had exactly this question, I think, in the trap card podcast. I don't know exactly what we said, but it was like something along the lines of either make more powerful trap cards, like the Ruma Karmic Cannon, I think, was at least my favorite example of a powerful modern trap card that actually is a trap card. Or you'd have to make trap cards that kind of like are not trap cards, right? Like the ones you're mentioning.
Yeah, like evenly matched. And
yeah, those don't feel like trap cards, right? So like I don't think that'd be a great solution. I think the simple solution is just make more good traps, which is something that feels like criminally underexplored. When we look at how many like powerful monsters and powerful spell cards we just don't get powerful trap cards much.
What was your first experience with stun, and how does stun change your view on basic game principles and deck building? I think we talked a little bit about the deck building aspect, but my very first experience with stun, I probably was just like Mirror Force John. I think I summoned a Shadow construct, and then like I put all my materials in the graveyard that I was like effect, and he was like, no, there's a Dimensional Fissure on the field, and then I read Dimensional Fissure, and I was just like, wow, that's a
that sucks.
That there's a card that just does that. That was yeah. What was your first experience with stun?
I mean, like back in my day, it was called meta beat, I guess, is the boomer answer.
Back
like,
in your day, Josh, those were just decks. Like they weren't stun control. That was just Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yeah. No, like unironically, they never felt great to play against, but they never were as problematic because usually you had outs to all the cards. It was like, well, summon Thunder King is okay. Well, I guess I'll set my Raikou and wait a turn before I search. So I don't know. It's like the game, because it was slower and back row was more relevant in general. Like every deck was playing back row, so every deck was playing back row removal. It wasn't like a thing really. Like stun as a whole concept. Like you could never rely on completely like stunning your opponent out of playing the game. So I guess the first real stun deck. What was the first real stun deck I played against? I don't even know. What's the first stun deck that even existed that was only a stun deck and nothing else?
I vaguely remember like TG maybe when I was like
even TG
my first
could
ever
play like a control game. Like they played Skill Drain and that's it. Like
yeah, I just remember Rush Rhino and Horn of the Phantom Beast and
it's like you have like macro monarchs or gravekeepers, but they all had game plans like even without necro value or without macro. Like they were all like it's hard. There really isn't there isn't really anything that comes to mind that literally like has to stun the opponent from back in the day. Like it just didn't exist. Skill Drain Beatdown. Even Skill Drain Beatdown didn't just rely on Skill Drain to stun out the opponent. It was like you specifically played monsters that were bigger than your opponents under Skill Drain. You just played Skill Drain to make your Barbaros like 3,000 or something. I don't know.
And stun as a deck building aspect, I think it depends on the format. You'll notice very specifically as an interesting point in the WCQ playoffs for Euros and the NAWCQ this format, all of those side decks, I think pretty much most of them just did not respect stun. Yep. No one played stun at the EU WCQ or NAWCQ playoffs, which would have been really interesting, by the way, because if you win a dice roll, those guys did not have a side deck card for stun cards.
Yeah, they would have lost.
Yeah, which is interesting because they absolutely did not respect it. I think if you're playing this format, I mean, this format's very, very like gone now by the time you're listening to this for sure.
Copium.
I think for this last format, you definitely should have been siding something for stun.
I was this close to side deck a card called Magical Blast at Euros. You know what that card is?
More like Magical Ass. Let me see. This is old, dude.
Mm-hmm.
Inflict 200 for each spellcaster you control. During your draw, if this is in your grave, before you draw, give up and add it to your hand. What is just
Okay, so
infinitely
there's
burn your
layers to
opponent?
this explanation. So the initial idea was, I know it doesn't work, but the initial idea was, if you play against Runick Stun, their only win con is decking you out. So what you do is you have 7 cards in hand with no deck, and you just end phase discard it all the time and then add it back. That was the idea. But then, like last week or so, I learned that doesn't even work, because apparently, if you have no cards in the deck, you cannot attempt to skip your normal draw. And I tested it in Master Duel. I tested it in Master Duel, and it doesn't work. So
wait,
I guess
where did you test this?
In Master Duel.
Like on stream, or was this for like Worlds or?
Yeah.
Oh shit! Wow, you guys sat there, made a room, got into a client, and that's insane. That's fair enough. Well, isn't the tech for that reason the Sword of Deep Seated?
What does that do?
It's the equip spell from like 20 years ago, where when it goes to the graveyard, you can put it to the top of your deck.
Well, what if they banish it with tip then?
Well, it's not different from the spell card, right?
No, that's never in your deck again. Like, it's just like goes from grave to hand, from hand to grave,
right,
from
right,
grave to hand.
yeah.
So that was the idea.
I
So I was just saying this by like, you can also sometimes get creative by finding a win condition against stun. Turns out that would have not actually worked. So I guess good thing I didn't do it, because like it'd be really stupid if you sit there for the entire game thinking you can't deck out, just letting your opponent do your thing, not even trying to play, and then at the end you'd have like 0 cards in deck. You're like, skip my draw phase, and then they like call a judge and they're like, no, we can't do that, you just lost. So I guess good thing I didn't do it. But I thought it worked. I didn't know it that they that's not a thing. Like I thought you could skip your draw phase to not deck out, because I remember people did that in Lightsworn back in the day. Like I'm pretty sure back in the day that worked. Because that's how I got the idea. I remembered that back in the day in Lightsworn, in order to not deck themselves out, people would play a card called Spirit Burner, which says you can skip your normal draw to add it back from the graveyard, because people would cite like Threatening Roar against Lightsworn when they had like 3 Luminas, because they would just mill themselves. But yeah, anyways, I digress.
Yeah, it's one of those things where like you need to have a deck, I think, initially or something, right?
It definitely does not work in Master Duel. In Master Duel, we tried it. It does not even ask you if you want to add it back. You just deck out and lose immediately.
Yeah. Daigusto Emerald has like a funny like interaction as well. If you have 0 cards in your deck, you can't use Daigusto Emerald to put a card into your deck.
Yeah, because you'd attempt to draw with no cards. Yeah.
Have you considered playing another TCG on the side while a format that you found was not fun was going on? If so, what game did you play and still play it? I think last year or 2 years ago, I played a decent amount of Hearthstone when Yu-Gi-Oh was somewhat on a down period. Yeah, Hearthstone was definitely one of my favorite non-Yu-Gi-Oh TCG games for sure. I do want to try Magic at some point as well in the upcoming few months. I'm really excited to try like a Magic like online draft or something. Apparently that game is like ass expensive, which is annoying. Paper and digital. So I don't know. Yeah, you were pretty good at Runeterra one time, weren't you?
Yeah, I loved Runeterra. I play a lot of card games every once in a while. It's not like, for me, it's not an issue of like, I don't know, Yu-Gi-Oh is not great right now, so I guess I'll look for a different one. It's just like I'm generally interested in a lot of card games, so I like tried most of them. Currently, I play a little bit of Lorcana with my fiance, but not much. It's just like I don't really have the time. I tried a bunch of card games, but I don't think anything really does it for me like Yu-Gi-Oh does. But I at least try to understand most of the other ones and what's going on there.
See, the thing is, it's like if you don't like if you want to change a pace in Yu-Gi-Oh, you could just play like an alt format, and like it just feels like a different game, and that's like why Yu-Gi-Oh I think is so cool. Like you just play Edison if you don't want to like do a Snake Eye mirror, you know, and it's
Dude, maybe it's also just the thing you mentioned earlier, the Zoomer Fortnite feeling that you got. Because I was talking to Pac recently, and he was like, he tried other games, and he was like, nothing does it for me, dude. I need the adrenaline rush of being able to combo for like 5 minutes. Otherwise, it just doesn't feel the same, you know?
Yeah. So yeah, it's it's just other stuff to keep yourself occupied with. I will say, yeah, I mean, for personally, Hearthstone was the most fun I've ever had with a card game that isn't Yu-Gi-Oh. I think it's mostly because uh, when it's digital, you can do so much more stuff.
Yeah,
Which I think is an
It
interesting.
feels very creative coming from a paper card game to be like, wait, they just like generate random cards from the universe into your hand or something.
I don't know how people would feel about this, but I think it would be really interesting, and maybe this would be pretty controversial for a lot of people, but I would love to maybe see some Master Duel exclusive cards.
Mm-hmm. Although that's something that they do in Duel Links. They got like skills of like just create this card in your hand and stuff like that.
Yeah, skills are definitely probably the closest I think we've had, but maybe like an event or something in Master Duel would be kind of cool, right? Like a Yu-Gi-Oh card that just like generates other Yu-Gi-Oh cards.
Summon
like,
a random dark monster, like stuff like
Imagine.
that. Yeah.
Dude, you activate a spell card, it summons a random dark in the game.
It'd be fun. It'd be a fun event. Like if they made that and just gave, you don't even have to build a deck for it. They just give you a bunch of like cards that have like random effects. It'd be fun. Like I would love that.
All right, everyone who's disagreeing with this is only disagreeing with it from the concept of like a competitive
it doesn't
perspective.
have to be competitive all the time. Hearthstone is the most fun when you don't care. Like when you just go in and gamba. It's like pure limit.
Princess wasn't Master Duel exclusive or something. Yeah, so that's the thing. Like Princess was technically Master Duel exclusive for like a day, but it wasn't designed for Master Duel.
It's not. It doesn't make use of the fact that it's exclusively a digital card, right?
That's the differentiating factor here. So when you think of like a digital advantage, is you can do things you can't do in paper. Like you can't activate Yogg-Saron's puzzle box in real life Yu-Gi-Oh. You can't activate 10 random spells in real Yu-Gi-Oh. Like that just wouldn't work. You'd have to like buy every spell card in the game,
Dude,
shuffle it, and then
activate 10 random spell cards would be so funny, man.
I know. Especially with Yu-Gi-Oh! Just so
and
many.
People are gonna say like, oh, but half of them will do nothing and stuff like that. Exactly, dude. It's the same in Hearthstone. It's like sometimes you kill yourself with Yogg-Saron, sometimes you Omega trash your opponent, sometimes it does nothing. Like that's the fun of it sometimes.
Did you ever see the Toast clip of the Yogg-Saron OTK?
Yeah, I know.
Oh my god. Like actual just lightning strike winning lottery like RNG.
It's
Holy
so
shit.
Fun, dude.
For anyone who doesn't know what the context is, you can just imagine there's a spell in Hearthstone that activates 10 random spells. So he very specifically hit like 4 or 5 combo pieces in a row, but in that specific order that resulted in just FTKing his opponent.
Yeah.
All right. I think we have covered most of these right now. There's nothing much else in terms of the current subject. So I think that was, all things considered, I think that was pretty interesting for a stun podcast.
It's a controversial topic, and it's hard to, I guess, understand every single perspective on the thing, because it's also very very divisive. I feel like it's like you either hate stun or you love stun unconditionally. So I hope we didn't hurt too many feelings.
Yeah. I think the consensus really is just like, as long as it's not going to be like Omega relevant format to format, I think it's probably okay that we still have good old little Fossil Dyna and his Moon Mirror Shield out in the world.
Although to be added onto that, I do think it might be a little bit more problematic in Best of One specifically, because then you literally have 0 chance to really prepare for it. But just a small add-on at the end, because I don't think we've mentioned that.
Yeah, just wait till Tenpai comes to Master Duel, Josh.
Oh, dude, that's whole nother beast. Like,
we should do a
problem.
Tenpai podcast.
Yeah, you hate Tenpai. Well, yeah, okay.
Honestly, I don't actually hate Tenpai. I hate Sangan summoning.
Okay, fair enough. That's fair enough. Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yep.
All right, very quickly, let's see how badly this is going to age. What are your Banlist predictions?
Oh my god! So this is a week after, so like we're definitely being caught. If okay.
Yeah. Let's see how badly we fucked up.
Let's do 5 each, okay?
All right.
Beatrice.
Okay.
0. Obviously. 1 skill drain. Flamberge banned. I know it's copium, but I'll say it. Sangan summoning to 1.
You can bring things back as well.
I don't care about bringing things back. I want things to die.
Okay, all right. Well,
And
there goes my block dragon suggestion.
I mean, you can use one of your 5 on the block dragon suggestion if you want to just have 4 real ones. What's my 5th one? I'm trying to think of Ubel. I think Ubel is so hard to hit because Phantom of Ubel is so new. Like normally I would, dude. I'm just gonna say that what I think is right. I'll just say Phantom of Ubel to 1, even though I don't think it's happening. But I'll just say it.
Okay. Did you say Os?
No.
Oh, okay. Right. So I don't think Original Sin is dying either. I think Azamina and the Wanted stuff is still going to be like relevant for future decks, so they're not going to hit Diabellstar in my opinion. So I think, yeah, I think Flamberge Dragon being banned for sure. I genuinely think Flamberge is going to get banned.
Yeah.
Skill Drain to 1 I think is a very safe bet. I will do the opposite, not make a change. I will guarantee a non-change. I do not think Beatrice will get banned.
Okay.
So I'm going to say Beatrice will not get banned. I think it's going to stay at 1.
Okay.
God, what else? Like, I really want this. It's complete cope, but I'm gonna say that Kick Colossus is gonna go to 1, and Rhino and Perla Rhino are gonna go to 1.
Wait,
they're just gonna limit every name.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's
right.
I'll just like a tier resurgence.
Okay.
I am so wrong. I don't even need to wait for next week. Like I am
that's
so wrong.
Yeah, no, that's pretty bad. If that happens, fine. Dude, you will never beat the allegations of being a Konami employee, by the way.
Dude, imagine.
If they limit Kikkolos, Rhinoheart, and Perla Rhino, it's over.
Imagine. I'll throw in a random one as well. I'm also going to mention Dimension Shifter. I think it's just not going to get touched. I think Dimension Shifter is going to stay at 3.
I think so too, unfortunately.
Yep. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this week's podcast. Feel free to give us more suggestions and topic discussions and just how the general vibe and feel of the podcast, because we do go on tangents sometimes, which I think is good. I think it's like makes it a little bit more authentic. It doesn't feel so corporate sometimes. So I do kind of like that. But do let us know in the comment section what you think about the general vibe and feel, special guests you want to see, different topics. And of course, Patreon is just a singular $1. It is like 80-90 cents for you Europeans or British people. So it's super worth it. Take part in the Discord discourse with us. Josh, I don't think has said anything in the Discord yet, but you get to talk to me. I do reply.
Oh, I read everything though.
Oh, he reads everything. Okay.
I do read it.
All right. So yeah, subscribe to the Patreon, and please do let us know in the comment section more feedback. I think this might be episode 30 or something. It's unbelievable to think we've done this many of them.
It's been a while, yeah.
Yeah, so that's genuinely really cool. I've been really enjoying it.
Me too.
It's just having like this thing that I think a lot of people do come to check out competitively and uncompetitively as well. I think we do offer a lot in so many different aspects of Yu-Gi-Oh! As a full package. So yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in. Subscribe, and we'll see you next week last week is the Banlist one. So next week is probably a Worlds recap of sorts, I assume. Yeah. That makes
Hopefully it went well, dude. You'll probably already know by the time you're listening to this how it went, but no.
Bye.
Bye.